the Beyond Fear podcast.
Welcome back to the Beyond Fear podcast. Today we're diving into something a lot of people are whispering about, but not many are saying out loud. GLP-1 medications like Mounjaro and Ozempic and what they mean for athletes. Bit of background, I've trained whilst on GLP-1. I've coached athletes trying to figure it all out, and over the past 12 months I've been getting asked a heap of questions on it all. I've got some thoughts grounded in real experience and a bit of science, so why don't we get into it? You'd be surprised how many athletes are using Mounjaro or Ozempic and, keeping it quiet. It's not just about weight loss or insulin regulation for some people. I'm seeing it pop up in triathlon forums, coaching groups, even people I know. But most people do not start out competitive when they're on the GLP-1s. They use it for health reasons to feel better and lose weight. Then they, see what their body can do, and they're trying to train with less appetite, lower energy, and sometimes even muscle loss. And that changes things, because while it's not traditional performance enhancement, it is shifting the playing field. So yeah, it's happening, and it's going to change how we talk about training, fueling and performance in endurance sport. Is Mounjaro the same as doping? Now that's quite a big question, right? And the short answer is no. GLP-1s like Mounjaro and Ozempic aren't banned substances, not by the WADA, not by Ironman, not in any major rule book. But when someone drops a load of body weight quite quickly, their running economy improves, their power to weight ratio goes up. And they didn't train for that, they did inject it. When I lost 3 stone on Mounjaro, people assumed I'd be super fast, but I still actually had to put in the same sessions, same hard sessions to get fast. What changed was doing those sessions, especially in running, just felt a lot easier, being lighter. But then again, those meds also make fueling harder, they slow down muscle building and cause energy dips that your training becomes so unpredictable. It's not a magic button, it is a gamble. So is it doping? Well, no. But is it a clean advantage? I say yes, but also an unpredictable and risky advantage, and the work still needs to be done. So should GLP-1s be banned in sport? Honestly, I go back and forth on this one. If someone's using it for medical reasons like type 2 diabetes, PCOS, significant metabolic issues, then I don't think they should be excluded. That doesn't feel ethical. But what about someone that's already lean and healthy, just trying to drop a few kilos before a race? And then there's people like me using it not to lose weight, but to stop regaining it. Because for some of us, that's a physiological battle. Those fat cells, they don't just disappear, they always want to refill. So using it to gain a short-term edge, that feels like, gaming the system. But here in the UK, at least, access is strict. You can't just buy a prescription for vanity or performance. GLP-1s don't make you fitter, but they do shift the playing field. And that can impact results in endurance sports where margins are tight. Maybe it's not about banning them, but maybe it's time they had to be declared, at least, maybe just in the pro field where they could be watched and monitored, and then filter whatever rules and regulations down into age group level as they get data. Another question I get asked is, can you actually train hard on Mounjaro? Yes, but it is not the same. You can absolutely train hard whilst on a GLP-1 like Mounjaro or Ozempic, but you have to adapt how you approach effort recovery and fueling. Your appetite is suppressed, your energy might be more variable, and quite often during higher zone training sessions, I just crash. And your recovery signals, they get a bit scrambled. You might feel fine, but you're underfueling without, meaning to. So pushing hard becomes unpredictable. Some days feel amazing and others just, they just don't land. You can still train hard, but it needs more planning, more awareness, and honestly, more kindness to your body, really. What impact does Tirzepatide have on endurance? That's Mounjaro. Mounjaro doesn't directly reduce your endurance, but it affects everything that supports it. So appetite, fueling, hydration, recovery, all the little things that keep endurance ticking. So the biggest shift I noticed was it was harder to eat enough on race days or long ride days. Even when I knew what I needed to eat, I just didn't want them. That delayed recovery, affected sleep, made back-to-back sessions harder to sustain. So it's not that Mounjaro makes you unfit, it's just that you have to work much harder to keep your body fueled and functioning for endurance performance. So can GLP-1s reduce your VO2 max? Yes, they can, and mine did for nearly a year. When I first started Mounjaro, I saw a huge drop in my VO2 max on Garmin. It lingered, it stuck, and I felt flatter. I wasn't hitting the same numbers. Sessions that used to feel controlled actually felt like a slog, and I was supposed to be getting faster, being lighter. But here's the thing, once I adjusted, built my training back around recovery and fueling, my VO2 max didn't just return, it has hit the highest numbers it has ever been. So yes, it might dip, but with the right approach, it's not permanent, and it's definitely not the end of your endurance performance. So what is the real cost of weight loss for performance? So we often talk about the gains, better power to weight ratios, lighter on the run, faster transitions, but what about the losses? Well, when you lose weight quickly, you risk losing more than fat. You can lose muscle mass, you can actually lose coordination and stability. And some people do lose confidence, confidence in your own strength. And when that happens, especially on GLP-1s, it does take longer to rebuild. Now, to be clear, GLP-1s do not make you lose any more muscle than any other weight loss method. Some studies have even shown that you actually keep more muscle than other methods. But because your training load might be the same, your fuel, your energy and nervous system aren't what they were. Weight loss might make your running stats look better on paper, but if your performance suffers, is it really worth it? And that answer is incredibly individually based on each person. So why do GLP-1s cause loss of power, not just weight? Because they don't just suppress appetite, they suppress drive in a really physical way. You lose more than just fat. You also lose a desire to lift heavy, push hard, or hold that top gear. So even if you're eating enough calories, your body isn't always absorbing or utilizing them in the same way. You're leaner, but you're not necessarily stronger. And in endurance sports, strength matters, for climbing, running posture, and even injury prevention. So yes, your body weight drops, but if your watts drop with it, are you really performing any better? Is strength loss a common side effect on GLP-1s? Well, it's more common than people think, especially in active women, because your appetite disappears, so does your protein intake, your micronutrient balance, and your recovery window. It doesn't tend to happen overnight, but over time, sessions start to feel heavier. You might plateau or feel weak, even though you're training hard. And the worst part is you might not notice until something hurts, or until your run form starts to fall apart. It's not just a strength problem, it's a fueling and feedback problem. Is muscle loss guaranteed on GLP-1s? As I said earlier, no, but it is a serious risk if you're not actively fighting against it. You need to be strength training, you need to be eating enough protein, and you need to be tracking your recovery, not just your weight. GLP-1s shift your body into a lower drive, lower intake state, which means your baseline training routine might no longer be enough to maintain your muscle mass. I added extra strength training sessions. I focused on my protein, especially when I really didn't want to eat. I focused on mechanical tension, not just reps. And it helped, but I had to be intentional about it. So no, muscle loss isn't guaranteed, but doing nothing to prevent it, well, that pretty much guarantees it will happen every time. Okay, so can the energy slump on GLP-1s be fixed? Well, yes, but not by pushing through it. The energy slump is usually your body saying, I don't have enough to give you right now. Whether that's calories, sleep, hydration, or from your nervous system. Something in your recovery is missing. When I was on Mounjaro, I had to stop guessing. I actually started logging meals again. I trained earlier in the day. I pulled back when I felt whack instead of just pushing through. The energy came back, but only when I listened. You can't force performance on an underfueled, overdrained body. Sometimes lazy just means your nervous system's trying to protect you. How do GLP-1s affect fueling for training? Well, they make it harder, plain and simple. GLP-1s like Mounjaro and Ozempic, they suppress appetite, they delay gastric emptying, and they change how your brain responds to like hunger cues. And that's fine when you're sedentary and you're not doing anything. But when you're training, especially for endurance sport, fueling isn't optional. When you just can't eat, because you don't feel hungry, you're waiting for that hunger and it might never come, and that leads to chronic underfueling, which then brings low recovery, poor sleep, hormonal disruption, injury risk. It's not about eating more food, it's about eating with intention. So especially when your appetite, has left the building. So what are the risks of training on a low appetite? And honestly, it's like the silent damage that's most dangerous. You're doing the sessions, you feel okay, but under the surface, your body's running on fumes. Your recovery slows down, muscle repair gets delayed, you start losing power without even realizing it. And worst of all, your nervous system just gets overloaded. You'll start skipping sessions, not because you're lazy, but because your body is trying to protect you. And the risk isn't just about undereating, it's about that disconnect between what you're asking your body to do and what you're giving it to do it with. So I like this question. When is the best time to train with Mounjaro? And in my experience, and in a lot of the athletes I've discussed this with, the best time to train hard on a GLP-1 is during peak season. Why? Because the effort is low, volume is steady, and fueling demands are more manageable. You're not doing maximum efforts, you're not chasing pace, you're building consistency and aerobic strength without pushing your appetite too far beyond what you can manage. That doesn't mean you can't do intensity, but if your appetite's already flat and your gut is slow to respond, trying to train for that, peak performance or race day, is harder than it should be. So plan for those low fuel phases. Base training gives you more margin for error and more space to adapt without breaking down. So here's an interesting one. Why does the data gap matter for women on GLP-1s? Well, it's because most of what we know about GLP-1s comes from studies on men or sedentary weight loss populations, not active women, not athletes, not anyone juggling hormones, training, life. And that matters because women metabolize differently. We have different hormonal rhythms. We're more prone to underfueling, and the side effects hit us differently and often harder. There's almost no sport-specific research on women using these medications. So when we say listen to your body, we mean it, because right now the data isn't listening to us. Until we have more research on female athletes, we have to lead the conversation ourselves. Can you still train well on Mounjaro, just differently? Yes, absolutely, of course you can. You can always train well whilst using GLP-1s, but you've just got to adjust your expectations and your approach. You won't have the same hunger cues, you might not recover quite as quick. You'll probably need to plan your nutrition with more intention than like ever before, but that doesn't mean you can't make progress. It just means that you're working with a new set of variables. You have to train with your body and not fight against it. So I adjusted my fueling, I slowed things down, I shifted focus to form, function, and just trying to be consistent. And my performance came back stronger than ever. It's not about training less, it's about training smarter and giving your body what it actually needs. And quite often that is also a little bit of love. Here's an odd one. How do GLP-1s affect your menstrual cycle? Now, no one warned me about this, but the effect was immediate. I took my first dose of Mounjaro and the next day I started my period. I was not due. I was not late from weight loss. My cycle had been unpredictable for years, anything from between 30 to 35 days, and then suddenly I was clockwork, 28 days to the day. for months. And it wasn't just about, oh, I've lost weight or I've improved my energy balance. From that first jab, something shifted hormonally instantly, and it was impossible to ignore. Now, from a training point of view, that is huge because predictable cycles help you plan intensity, recovery, fueling, even race day. How many times as women do we have to guess how our hormones are impacting on our performance? This removes so much guesswork, and honestly, it changed how I built my plan. It's not a side effect you see in the brochures, but for some women, it is one of the most impactful. I'm often asked, how did I adapt my training on Mounjaro? And at first I didn't. I just tried to keep training exactly the same volume, same intensity, same plan, same fueling routine, and it didn't work. So my energy actually was really good, but whenever I did anything high intensity, I just plateaued. I started skipping sessions because I just felt off. So I adjusted. I trained earlier in the day when I had more natural energy. I switched my nutrition focus from appetite to habit, so eating because I had to, not because I was waiting to feel hungry. I added strength work to protect muscle mass even when I wasn't in the mood. And I allowed recovery days when I needed them, not just when the plan said so. So it wasn't about backing off, it was just about adapting. And once I did that, everything improved. But getting there now, what do the side effects of Mounjaro feel like for active people? Now, this one's difficult. It is different from person to person, but for me, it felt like my edges got dulled. It's like not from hunger, but drive. I didn't feel tired. I just didn't feel like pushing. The get up and go that I normally thrive on, it just wasn't there. So food felt like a chore. I had to remind myself to eat, and that made recovery harder. I didn't lose motivation completely, but it did shift, and it wasn't coming from the same place anymore. And for someone who's used to training being a release, that has been tough, and it's been quite a long-term thing. It's got better, but I had to be really deliberate with fueling, sleep, emotional check-ins to get through that phase. So are you fueling enough for your actual training load? Now, here is the trap. You train hard, you recover well, you build momentum, then you start a GLP-1 and you can assume that you're going to keep going the same way. But with appetite down and energy intake low, your body starts working from a deficit. And because you're still showing up, it's easy to miss the signs. Slower recovery, sore muscles for longer, that foggy brained fatness that creeps in. Your training hasn't changed, but your food intake has. Something has got to give. And usually it is your performance. It can be your mood or your cycle. So yes, you might be hitting the plan, but if you're not feeling like the athlete you are, you're not going to get the results that you want. So what do I wish I'd known before starting Mounjaro? Now, I wish I'd known that my body was capable of working with me, not just against me. Because even though I was training 10 to 15 hours a week, calorie counting, lifting, running, my weight just kept climbing, and it was terrifying. I wasn't even 40 and I felt like I'd lost control of my body. I'd always been heavy, but I'd always been able to shift the weight when I really tried. Then suddenly nothing was working, and it wasn't a discipline problem. It was blood chemistry. I took Mounjaro because I felt like it was my last option. And what happened shocked me. My body felt calm, like it had finally had the signal it needed. I wasn't thinking about food constantly. I wasn't craving sugar or feeling like I had to fight myself every day. And yes, the weight started to come off, but more than that, I had my focus back. I had energy again. I could train without the mental fog of constant hunger and frustration. We're always told to be more motivated, to control our cravings, or, we've somehow failed. But for me, that tiny 2.5 milligram dose gave me the quiet I needed to get on with my life. And that's what I wish I'd known, that this wasn't a failure, it was just chemistry. And finally, it all made sense. So that is it for today's episode. If you've made it this far, thank you. I know this is a complex, emotional topic. We all have different thoughts and feelings on it for a lot of us. And whether you're using a GLP-1, considering it, or just trying to understand what your body needs right now, I hope this gave you something useful, something honest, something real. And this isn't about shortcuts. It's about survival, adaptation, and learning to train on your terms, not someone else's timeline or expectations. So I'm not here to tell you what to do, but I am here to say, if your body's been feeling unfamiliar lately, you are not alone. No, you're not broken. So if this resonated, I'd love to hear from you. Drop me a message, leave a comment, or share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. Like and subscribe. And if you're working through your own journey, keep going. The body changes, but strength, resilience, and confidence, you can rebuild those, and you don't have to do it perfectly. You just have to start. So speak soon, and as always, keep moving beyond fear.